Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sean Durns, and I'm a senior research analyst for CAMERA based in Washington, D.C. For those of you who might be new to our work, CAMERA works to ensure fair and accurate coverage of the Middle East and related issues, to include anti-Semitism and terrorism. We are pleased to have with us today Sarit Zehavi, the founder of the Alma Center and a lieutenant colonel in the IDF Reserves. The Alma Center is an Israeli-based education and research center that is dedicated to studying the security challenges on Israel's northern border. Speaking for myself and for many of my colleagues, the Alma Center's research is critical. I've relied on and cited their reports and articles in numerous op-eds, articles, and letters to journalists and editors. And there is much to write and talk about, unfortunately. As Sarit will no doubt highlight today, 75 years after its recreation, Israel is facing significant security challenges and a rapidly changing security environment. First, some housekeeping. While Sarit is speaking, please feel free to type your questions in the box below. We'll be turning to the question and answer portion after her presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sarit.
Thank you very much. I just, want to start with describing what happened here in the past few months, because a few things happened on Israel's borders, by the way, not only in the north, but mainly in the north, that created the impressions that things are changing here. And new things happen, new for us as residents of the Galilee, and things that didn't happen here in the past, at least 16, 17 years. So I want to start from 2 months ago, when I was, by the way, on the border, and I understand that something is happening. Some of the areas were closed. Something very unusual is happening, which I don't know exactly what. And the day afterwards, we hear that a side road bomb exploded 80 kilometers from the Israeli-Lebanese border, far away from where I live. I live 12 kilometers from the border. In the lower Galilee, wounded one Israeli, and a few hours later, we learned that this was the side road bomb that came from Lebanon. The type of the bomb is produced in Lebanon. This is something we experienced many times when we were inside Lebanon in the past. And we understand something happened here, which is different from anything we've known in the past few years over here in Israel. The next day, we learned that the Israeli security forces found the infiltrator who came from Lebanon. He was on his way back. They found him a few kilometers from the Lebanese border. He was carrying an explosive belt, meaning that his mission was to carry out a bigger attack, not only the side road bomb that he planted. And he was killed by the security forces here because of the fact that he was planning to commit suicide or having a suicide belt on him. This kind of incident of an infiltrator that crossed the fence with explosives on his way to execute an attack in Israel didn't happen here in the past 20 years. It is extremely unusual. And everybody were asking who this person is, how did he come, and the evaluations are that this person is probably part of a Palestinian group, maybe a Palestinian, but definitely Hezbollah from Lebanon is involved in what happened, because this kind of infiltration and planning this kind of attack from Lebanon is not something that can be planned without the assistance or at least the knowledge of Hezbollah. A month passed, and now it was Passover a month ago. I had like 30 guests at home, a big meal in the afternoon. And after I served food for 30 people, I cooked for 2 days, made all the preparations. My nephew says, Sarit, I hear explosions, something is happening. And I am the expert, I should know. And I was surprised. I said nothing is happening, and I continued to drink my wine. I didn't want anything to interrupt the celebration. But actually, 10 minutes later, we had tens of rockets that were intercepted by the Iron Dome just above my home. this is extremely unusual. 36 rockets were launched that day from Lebanon to Israel, to the Galilee, to the area where I live in the Western Galilee. 25 were intercepted by Iron Dome. 5 landed inside communities in the Galilee. Luckily, not in my community. We didn't have the sirens in my community. We didn't have to run for shelter. But it was definitely a very unusual incident. And even though I try to stay calm and drink my wine and continue to eat and, deliver the message to my family, and even outside of my family, I made a video that day. This is a little bit stressful, to admit the truth. And the question right afterwards was, first, who sent these rockets? And second, what's the Israeli retaliation is going to look like? So to the first question, again, the evaluations are that it was Hamas who launched these rockets. Hamas from Lebanon. There is a presence of Hamas in Lebanon, not like Hezbollah, but yet with some capabilities. And yet it is important to say again, Hamas cannot launch that amount of rockets from Lebanon without the encouragement, the assistance of Hezbollah. These rockets were launched from orchards, olive orchards, orange orchards. The plan was to launch much more rockets. Many of them were found afterwards by the Lebanese army in those places. These are private territories that probably belong to the supporters of Hezbollah, since Palestinians in Lebanon are not entitled to have any property. They are considered refugees. The third thing I want to say, and if you can screen the first slide there, you can see how it looks like. In the past 2 years, we see much more activity of Hezbollah right on the border in a very provocative way to make sure that we Israelis see them. They are gathering intelligence. They are taking photos of us. The person that you see with the sunglasses and the mask between the bushes, this is from last Sunday. I was with a group of tourists. He pumped out of the bushes, taking photos of me with a big camera. He was dressed as military. Sometimes these guys are armed. And actually, we know that these are commando fighters of Hezbollah. They are all over the border, and they are creating provocations and sometimes even clashes with the IDF, while the IDF is pretty much busy with building the wall all along the borderline. A big project that cost a lot of money, that was intensified and accelerated in the past year. And the reason that IDF is building a wall instead of the old fence that you can see in the picture here is because the IDF understands that Hezbollah had developed kind of an offensive plan to be capable of sending these kind of commando fighters into Israel when they get the order to cross easily, like this person crossed 2 months ago, and to carry out terrorist attacks, but not with small squads of 1 to 15 military operatives, but with hundreds of military operatives. That's the Hezbollah plan, not necessarily to be executed tomorrow morning, but a plan that the IDF wanted to provide a defense from, and that's why it is building a wall instead of this old fence that we've got. The second question about all of these developments in the past months that I've now described is, who is behind all of that? Like, okay, for 17 years, we didn't have these kind of rockets. For 20 years, we didn't have this kind of attack. What's going on here? And our understanding was that there is an address to all of that, which is Iran. And if you can screen the next slide of the Joint Operation Room, you can actually see the vision of the Iranians. It's not, they didn't fulfill it yet. It's not, it doesn't exist yet. There is no Joint Operation Room to all these different groups that you can see in the slide from various countries, various areas, and you can also see that they are but Iran is doing whatever it can to create this collaboration and to create a multi-front situation against Israel, that all these proxies of Iran in the region will be able and will be willing, which is more of a challenge, to participate in an escalation of war against Israel. This didn't happen yet, but this is the vision. Now, if we're talking about the capabilities of all these groups, definitely the strongest and the most professional group among all of these is Hezbollah in Lebanon, which, as you can see, is financed with $700 million every year by Iran, which is holding thousands and tens of thousands of rockets to various ranges that cover almost all of Israel. Most of them are inaccurate, but these are huge amounts of rockets that, as you can already understand by what I've just described about what happened to me, these rockets are too much for Iron Dome. And other organizations have more. This is what Iran wants, and let's talk about what Iran have. So we understand what they have in Lebanon. Let's say one word of what they have in Syria, and this is very important because Syria is a strategic asset for Iran. It is actually functioning today after the status quo in Syria is kind of stabilized. And if you can put the next slide, everybody will be able to understand. We understand that Syria is kind of in the end of what we call the Iranian land corridor. Hundreds of thousands of trucks that are driving all the way from Tehran through Iraq into Syria, bringing advanced weapons, missiles, rockets, accurate missiles, drones, long-range missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, etc., into Syria, and from there into the hands of Hezbollah. Sometimes it stops in Syria, sometimes it goes further to Lebanon. And as you can see in the map, there are so many colors and so many symbols and so many different players in the Syrian arena that actually Syria doesn't exist as a sovereign state, and everybody is having kind of a share in Syria, while Iran succeeded in preserving a stable presence in Syria along this corridor, especially on a border crossing with Iraq over there. And that way, the Iranians can continue this transfer of ammunition. Of course, Israel is trying to fight that. And only in 2022, we have seen around 30 attacks that were attributed to Israel in Syria, in various areas in Syria, against this kind of ammunition, against these shipments, most of them by the land, and others even by airplanes, civilian flights that are coming from Tehran, landing in Damascus, landing in Aleppo, landing even in Beirut. I want to show you how it looks like. You can show us the next video, which is a convoy of trucks, but this is very special because it's a convoy of trucks that were driving during 1 out of 1,000 trucks that were driving into the region, that were crossing the border crossing from Iraq to Syria during the month after the earthquake that you probably heard of, the huge earthquake that happened in Turkey and created a lot of damage in northern Syria as well. Under the cover of humanitarian assistance from Iran to Syria, many trucks move into Syria, and probably not all of them were carrying just humanitarian assistance. This enabled the Iranians two things. First, to transfer ammunition, to transfer more weapons, hiding it there. And second, to create influence in these areas that are truly getting Iranian humanitarian assistance. All of that, the map, the video, everything I've just said about Syria is, kind of combined together to one moment, or if you like, 3 days, which are happening as we speak, which is the Arab League conference that started yesterday and continues tomorrow. But for the first time, you see Syrian representatives, the foreign minister, the president, coming back to the Arab League, meeting all the Arab leaders with the blessing of Saudi Arabia. 2 months after Saudi Arabia signed a normalization agreement with Iran. So you can understand that a conflict, what we call the Shiite-Sunni conflict, that we used to talk about in the past decade or so, between Iran and Saudi Arabia and proxies of Iran and proxies of Saudi Arabia in Syria, in Yemen, maybe elsewhere, something is changing here. It doesn't mean that Saudi Arabia or the other Sunni states are going to end the relationship, those who have relationship with Israel. It doesn't mean that the Abraham Accords are going to be canceled, but it definitely means that Saudi Arabia and the Arabs are doing a different kind of calculation now. It definitely means that there is no Sunni bloc, which includes Israel and United States, against a Shiite axis, but there is a Shiite axis. Having said that, there is some good news. And in order to explain what are the good news, I actually want to talk about something not very good that happened here, which is the escalation last week. And in the escalation last week, what happened is that after the death of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad prisoner in Israel, who starved himself to death after 80 days, this was a great excuse for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad to create an escalation from Gaza this time. And it launched 104 rockets in 24 hours from Gaza into Israel. It was clear to Israelis that there should be retaliation, and the big question was, how do we create a retaliation that will deter and that will damage the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but on the other hand, will not deteriorate us to this multi-front war that the Iranians are threatening us in the past few months. And eventually, a week later, what Israel had done is to kill 3 Palestinian Islamic Jihad commanders, senior commanders. One was involved in the shooting of the 100 rockets. Another one was involved in transferring knowledge of building rockets to West Bank. Can you imagine that? Rockets will be in the hands of Palestinian Islamic Jihad in West Bank. And the third one was a senior in Palestinian Islamic Jihad that in the past was also, today is involved in money transfer. And in the past, he was involved in killing a family in Gaza, a mother and 4 daughters. All of them were killed with a very accurate airstrike to their homes. And yes, they were killed along with their families. And I'm saying that very sadly. We knew that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad would retaliate. We were waiting for its retaliation. And to our experience, in previous escalations, the retaliations came very quickly after a few hours. And it didn't come. We waited, and it took the PIJ more than 12 hours, I think almost 24 hours, to retaliate. And what I understand out of that, what I take out of that, is that something was not going the right way as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad expected. They wanted to create a situation that Hamas from Gaza, Hamas from Lebanon, Hezbollah, maybe other groups will join them. And it didn't happen. So eventually they retaliated by themselves, and we had the escalation. And maybe you can show us the slide of 5 days of escalation in Gaza, IDF operation, PIJ launching rockets, and you can see that about 1,500 rockets were launched in few days from Gaza to Israel. These rockets, by the way, are not in a very high quality. They are self-manufactured in Gaza, and that's why you can see that almost 300 were misfired and landed in Gaza, risking the Gazians themselves, killing some Gazians. You can see the performance of the Iron Dome. That's more than 95% success. And yet, rockets also fell in Israel, killing one Israeli and one Gazian worker who was inside Israel. How can this be good news? I started by saying that this is good news, because during these days, we have seen that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was interested in getting to a ceasefire very quickly after like 1 or 2 rounds of fires against Israel's south and a little bit to the center as well. But he was under a lot of pressure to continue. And eventually what we call this round of escalation ended with no agreement on truce, with no agreement of the terms of stopping. It just stopped. And this is very different from previous operations because we couldn't agree upon the terms. And the feeling was by the publications on phone calls and meetings and pressure, we understand that maybe what was happening behind the scenes is that the Iranians were encouraging Palestinian Islamic Jihad to continue, while Palestinian Islamic Jihad wanted to stop because more commanders were killed during the operation. And actually, all the operational commanders of the PIJ were killed by Israel, and the leadership of the PIJ outside of Gaza had to take the lead during those days of fighting. And these people outside of Gaza are more affiliated with Iran. Just to mention, PIJ is fully supported by Iran. And there was kind of a tension between the two. And this is good news because all of that, the bottom line, means that the Iranians' vision to create a multi-front war against Israel, to create a joint operation room with all these factions and organizations together, didn't succeed. And it was the PIJ by himself. It's also a situation that is very comfortable to Hamas, since Hamas, is not paying any cost around that, while the PIJ is paying the cost, and the PIJ is fueling the resistance against Israel. But on the other hand, the PIJ had to fight this fight alone. So sometimes you see how bad news becoming good news in a very awkward way over here in the Middle East. And I think I will stop over here. Sean, if you want to open it for questions.
Thank you, Sarit, for that informative presentation. I'd like to take the moderator's prerogative and ask a few questions. You've talked a bit about how Iran supports proxies like Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, among others. But how does Iran itself, which is mired in domestic crises and experiencing skyrocketing inflation, get the funds to do so? Where does the money come from?
So part of the answer is in your question, because Iran, the Iranian ayatollahs, and of course, whenever I say Iran, Iranians, etc., I don't mean the people, I mean the government. The Iranian ayatollahs, they don't really care about the people. Inflation, domestic crisis, okay, as long as they survive, it's fine. Their mission is to distribute the Islamic Revolution values outside of Iran, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the United States, wherever. Doesn't matter how much it costs. So that's one thing. As long as they can survive this, okay, they don't care that there is no prosperity. But there is a second thing which is important, and I call it the alternative economy. Look, there are sanctions of the United States, of the UN, of Europe, I don't know who, against Iran, against Syria, against Lebanon, against Hezbollah, against Russia. And eventually what you see is an economic cooperation or collaboration and you see that Iran is selling oil to China, and you see that Iran is selling ammunition to Russia, and Russia is selling all knowledge to Iran, and they are talking about building a trail now between Iran and Russia, and all of a sudden China is involved in rebuilding areas in Iraq and in Syria, and Iran is involved there as well, and you see some businesses happening. And what do you see here? You see an alternative economy that Syria, Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, and maybe I forgot somebody else, are marketing between themselves. And that's why they are bypassing the sanctions and have the money to finance all these wars.
The resistance economy, I guess you could.
If you like, I like that.
Relatedly, in your many years watching the northern border, how has Hezbollah's information warfare changed? What is the same since, say, 2006, and what is different?
So, look, it's funny to say it, but what is different is actually different everywhere in the world. 2006, there was no social media. Today, there is social media. Hezbollah back then and today, to tell you honestly, they are very good in psychological warfare, in threatening Israel by Nasrallah himself and broadcasting his speeches, by using traditional media, by producing propaganda videos, threatening the state of Israel, showing their exercises, etc. But the general change of using social media, either by using it to publish in the, I would say, official platforms in social media, or by boots, this is amazing. I can say that a lot of materials that Alma Center use from Hezbollah sources, these are actually Hezbollah affiliated sources. It's not official account of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah, I don't know if you know, has a huge civilian system named the Executive Council that has 9 units that deals with the different fields in life, needs, services for the population. 2 of them are dealing with this, the communication unit and the electronic unit. Communication unit is the one who is responsible for radio, TV, newspapers, etc. And electronic unit, which it hires around 100 operatives, kind of an electronic army, is operating in social media against those who are against Hezbollah. They promote the narratives of Hezbollah. They have campaigns in social media, and they are trying to influence. By the way, most of this propaganda is not, the target audience is not Israel, even though it's all about propaganda against Israel and threatening Israel, etc. But most of it is in Arabic and Hebrew, meaning the target audience is not only Israelis, it's also the Lebanese themselves, to try to get the support of the Lebanese themselves. In this unit, there are 2 units that are responsible of the army boots of Hezbollah, thousands of accounts that their mission is to promote the political goals of Hezbollah and to gather information and to block anti-Hezbollah users, etc.
Okay. So Hezbollah TikTokers. The IDF has been talking recently about the perils of potentially facing a multi-front war. This is something that a number of organizations, Camera included, have been writing about since at least 2017. But in the event that this occurs, which theater, if any, should be prioritized? The North, the South? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I was in the military for 15 years. What we are saying on officers in the military is that they can't prioritize. Everything is important, everything is urgent, and everything must be done immediately. But, okay, I would say this way. I wouldn't prioritize a specific area or a specific arena. I would prioritize a specific capability. So I think the main capability that today is threatening, putting a strategic threat to Israel is exactly this, what I call the artillery, missiles, rockets, drones, advanced missiles, accurate missiles, all of the above. Iron Dome is very successful and gave us a lot of security, which you could see clearly with what was happening here in the past 2 months. But Iron Dome is very expensive. And Iron Dome, to intercept these amounts of rockets, it's a lot of money, and I'm not sure we can handle it. So we are now putting all our hopes in a new technology named the laser. It's not going to, again, it's not going to provide 100% security or defense, but it's going to be much cheaper than Iron Dome. So this is one thing. Second, I think it's the cyber. This is also very important. I think Israel should work on our cyber defense and cyber offense, both of them. It's a relatively new field. I know that in the past 5 years, we've made a huge progress in this, and this is very important. And the biggest threat is the nuclear. And what Iran had achieved in the past year is definitely not for civilian needs and should be a source to worry, not only to Israel, but also for the rest of the world.
I'd like to piggyback off of that answer. I'd like to talk about deterrence. More specifically, is Israel losing deterrence against an emboldened Iran?
I'll give you an answer that is not the usual answer of Israelis. Like most Israelis will tell you, yes, we are losing the deterrence, we should do this, and that, and they will be deterred, and they will understand that they shouldn't mess with us because we are the crazy Israelis, they can do this, and that, if anybody will mess with us. This is very nice, but to tell you the truth, the situation assessment that is happening in Tehran or in Beirut is not based only on what Israel is doing. Of course, there is an importance to the political crisis in Israel, to how we retaliate to the attacks that I've mentioned, etc. But it's not the only thing that they are taking in consideration. And it's important to pay attention that when the Iranians are reading the map, they are looking on a few more things. They are looking at Russia that is now buying the drones from them. They are looking at United States that didn't do anything to make the Iranians pay something for the progress in the nuclear program. They are looking at Saudi Arabia and the Arabs that complied with the fact that Assad stays, that Iran stays in Syria, that Hezbollah is still there in Lebanon, and accepted Syria back to the Arab League. And when they see all of that, maybe they gain a little bit more self-confidence, and this is something that damages the deterrence rather than just the Israeli deterrence, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
So in this sense, the Arab League welcoming back Syria only further erodes deterrence.
Yeah, in a way, and it's something that it's not dependent on Israel.
Right, which is important to recognize. It's my understanding that there's a joint operations room based in Lebanon that is exclusively focused on sowing internal strife in Israel, and that this operations center played a key role in the 2021 conflict. Can you talk about that at all?
I don't think there is an operation room in Lebanon. There is an operation room in Gaza that involves Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There is a vision of the Iranians that they want to create a joint operation room, maybe in Lebanon, maybe elsewhere, but that will include Hezbollah and others, as I've shown you in the slide. I do believe that May 2021 was coordinated. I wouldn't call it a joint operation room, but I agree with the assessment that something happened there that created a situation that at the same time of rockets that were fired by Hamas to Jerusalem, we have seen Arabs in Israel going out to the streets with extreme clashes against Jews over here, something we haven't seen for 20 years here. There was incitement in the social media in a scale that you couldn't imagine. We see this today as well, but back then it was kind of new, and and the Arabs follow that. Today, I think they are not following that the same way. I hope. Let's see what will happen today and tomorrow. We are celebrating Jerusalem Day as we speak now. So I do believe there was an involvement of Iran in this incitement on social media. I do believe until today that the Iranians are trying to accelerate and expand the escalation in the West Bank. They are pushing that behind the scenes, but it's not a joint operation room like what you've got in Gaza, the collaboration between the PIJ and Hamas. That's what they want, but they're not there yet.
To kind of follow up on that, weapons smuggling into Judea and Samaria, is that emanating from Iran?
Yes, I don't know if everything, but what I can say, by the way, not only to Judea and Samaria, the weapon smuggling on Israel's borders from Lebanon, from Jordan to Judea and Samaria, and from Jordan to Israel, this is happening in the past 2 years in scales that we are not used to. It was always happening. When I was in the army, I don't know, 17 years ago, 16 years ago, yeah, we talked a lot about arms smuggling, but not at the scale that we are experiencing today. Almost every week, I get a message, a IDF spokesperson send me a message, like all the reporters, we just caught a smuggling of this and that, weapons or drugs. And I believe that Iran has a hand in this, again, in accelerating this. And guys, I must emphasize something. It's not an organized mechanism that you have a commander that gives the orders to the soldier, that he's a young commander, that gives the order to another commander, that gives the order to the soldier. There is no strict chain of command. There is encouragement. There is involvement in money, in financing. There is creating an atmosphere. There is encouraging by agents on the ground. But it's not a chain of command. So sometimes to find a source in Iran is almost impossible.
Thank you. Now, in the event of another conflict, and it seems like that's regrettably probably a certainty, if there's a coordinated rocket attack from, say, Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza, then perhaps Iron Dome won't be able to handle it all. What do you see as the likely scenario for this to happen, and how should Israel respond?
First, I must say that on Passover, when we had the rockets coming from Lebanon, the day afterwards, there were rockets from Syria as well, which made us understand that something is coordinated here. So it's not joint operation room, but it's coordinated. Second, yes, multi-front escalation that rockets will be launched from various fronts will take us to war. Will take us to a situation that Israel will have to retaliate in a large scale, much greater than what we've seen in Gaza in the past few days, or in Lebanon after the rocket launching, definitely. Israel will have to fight that. There will be damage in Israel, but there will be damage on the other side as well, because it's important to clarify, in Lebanon, those rockets are hidden inside the homes or under the homes of the Lebanese. They are hidden inside the civilian structure, the infrastructure of Lebanon, not only in the south, also in Beirut. And it means that actually the Lebanese, like the Gazians, are human shields by Hezbollah in Lebanon or by the PIJ and Hamas in Gaza. And eventually Israel will have to defend itself. And we will have great dilemmas of how exactly to do it. But this is the risk that Hezbollah is putting its own population in, as you could see in Gaza as well.
Thank you, Sarit. I would like also, just as an aside, to note for our listeners and viewers that Hezbollah's use of human shields and its manipulation of towns in Lebanon is something that the Alma Center is just so thoroughly documented, and they're such a great resource in that respect. So if you'd like to know more, I would encourage you to visit their website and look at their research, because it's terrific, and it's something that you're not going to get from mainstream media outlets here in the U.S.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Going back to this last conflict here, just last week, should Hamas have been made to pay a price given their control of Gaza, or was it right for the IDF to kind of single out PIJ, given what Islamic Jihad was attempting to do?
This is a very good question. I think Hamas should pay a price, but not necessarily with bombs. In opposed to the PIJ, Hamas controls Gaza. And it became very important for Hamas to, as I've said, to survive, to create a situation that the population is not prospering, but at least survive. The fact that there are between 17,000 to 25,000 Gazians crossing the border to Israel every day to work in Israel, they all in all support or finance with the money they earn in Israel about half of the population in Gaza. About half of the population in Gaza. With the minimum salary that they get, minimum in Israeli scale, that they're getting paid here in Israel. For Hamas, this is very important. Yeah, border crossing. Hundreds of trucks are crossing every day into Gaza from Egypt and from Israel. These are materials that cement can be used to build tunnels and can be used to build schools and hospitals. What Hamas is doing with this cement? Money is coming from Qatar and being paid to Hamas to survive. Money can be used for a lot of things. So I think there are many ways to put the pressure on Hamas, not only bombs.
Excellent. Thank you. And going back to one of your points you made earlier, when in your estimation will Israel be ready to field its laser system that will be capable of eliminating incoming drones, missiles, and rockets, and perhaps enhance Israel's deterrent capability?
What we hear is that within a year, maybe a little bit more, it will become operational. But the word operational is a little bit misleading because it means that it will be able to use it for the first time. It doesn't mean that it will have the performance of what you see today from Iron Dome, because after it is becoming initially operational, I'll put it this way, it takes time to improve it. And we've seen the same process with Iron Dome as well. And as I've said, there are limitations to the system as it is, with weather, clouds, day or night, and other limitations. I'm not a technical expert, but the fact is that within a year, we will be able to get started with using that. I hope. Again, it's until I will not see the first laser in the sky, I will not believe it, but these are the evaluations of the experts. That's
it's truly amazing. I should note I'm reading a book right now by a Pentagon analyst where he talks about the use of these lasers, and this is really the future of warfare. So when this does occur, many interested parties from Washington to Beijing will be watching, I think. Why, in your opinion, in this last conflict, did Hamas and Hezbollah not actively participate and make more of a coordinated effort with Islamic Jihad? Okay, first I must say that we didn't know. Okay, when all of that started, I can give an example from my daily life. I meet tens of groups every month on the Lebanese border. When the escalation in Gaza started, we had a situation assessment here in Alma with the research department. And we said, during the years, if there was an escalation in Gaza, Hezbollah doesn't really care about the PIJ. We continue our lives the way they are. This time, we were more careful and we said, we are not sure. We are not sure that the situation is the same as it used to be. And that's why we didn't take the groups to the border. We were very careful. We went to areas which are a little bit far from the border, areas that we know that are protected by Iron Dome, not open areas, somewhere, nowhere that the people will not be protected. So it was like 50-50. We didn't know whether Hezbollah will get involved or not. I think what we've learned from this escalation is that if the Iranians want to create a joint operation room, they will need to create a joint interest.
So last summer, for example, Hezbollah was willing to go to war against Israel. Hezbollah was prepared to war against Israel. Hezbollah was preparing the hearts and minds of its military operatives on the border to war against Israel. And the reason was Hezbollah said clearly, Israel, if you're not going to get an agreement with Lebanon around the maritime border, meaning which will enable Lebanon to continue the project of searching for gas and taking the gas out of the water, we are going to war. And eventually Israel made a concession. We made an agreement like kind of in the last minute, literally in the last minute. And Hezbollah didn't go to war. It didn't promise anything. It just didn't go to war. So Hezbollah is willing to take more risks today when we speak about escalation and even war against Israel, but not for the PIJ, for its own interests. So the Iranians will have to provide interest to Hezbollah, interest to Hamas, etc.
Interesting. So that puts more of an onus, of course, on Tehran. They're sort of their head, if you will, in some sense. I
must tell you that after the last conflict in Gaza, I became a little bit more optimistic.
That's great.
Yeah.
We'll definitely
with all the risks over here.
Right. That's definitely good to hear. What is the Israeli, going back to Israel South, what is the IDF plan to take down Hamas in the event of a multi-front scenario? Obviously, this is speculation perhaps on your part, but what do you think the IDF can, should, and perhaps might do in Israel South in the event of a multi-front war?
I don't know. I guess that in a multi-front war, and here I'm just guessing, okay? IDF will try to create a situation that one front is contained and we can focus on the other one. Doesn't matter which is which. But I believe this is what we will do with most of the efforts to take it one at a time, as much as possible. So in one front, we will probably focus on defense, while in the others in offense, and that way we will try to manage that. But I'm just evaluating now, okay?
Now, in the event of a multi-front war against Israel, again, this is, of course, speculation on your part, informed speculation, certainly. What do you see Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE perhaps doing?
In one word, nothing. In two words, trying to bring, to make it stop. And in three words, it depends, maybe 2 words. It depends on whether it's going to be around the nuclear issue or something else. If it's going to be around the nuclear issue, I guess that below the surface, we will see more support from the Arabs. If it's going to be for a different reason, which I don't know exactly, and kind of, I don't know, kind of an Iranian interest, kind of decision, kind of escalation that we didn't expect, whatever. I believe that everybody will encourage the parties to stop hostilities.
Recently, an idea of weapons being smuggled through Egypt. How can this weapons smuggling be stopped? And additionally, Jordan has violated its peace treaty terms by allowing weapons smuggling, and has also participated in Hamas/Iran incitement, increasingly inciting against Israelis. What can be done to thwart this or minimize this?
I hear from your questions that you're looking for solutions. And I'm sorry, I don't have all the solutions in my pocket. And if I had, I would probably run to Prime Minister. So what I can say is that sometimes it's just day by day. More activity on the borders to stop the smuggling of arms, enforcing the forces there, changing the tactical deployment of the forces there, building fences, building walls, bringing more electronic measures. As you could see with what happened with the Jordanian parliament member, having good intelligence and then stopping him at the crossing, the border crossing. It's just it's a fight that goes on day by day. This is with the drugs. The question was actually divided between the issue of the drugs and weapons smuggling and the issue of public opinion in Jordan.
Right.
And public opinion in Jordan it's even more of a challenge, since what you actually see is that in Jordan, the majority of the population are Palestinians. So the government of Jordan, the king, is very much interested with good relationship with Israel, since we provide security and we provide water and we provide gas and electricity. And there is kind of dependency of I can't say all Jordanians, but with infrastructures, we provide them a lot of things. And eventually, you don't see this. You don't see this translated into good relationship. Because from the level of the people, there is a lot of incitement against Israel. And still there are Palestinian majority, there is a Palestinian majority in Jordan. So I pretty much understand the dilemma of the Jordanian king. And I must emphasize that it is also the interest of the state of Israel that he will stay on power, that there will be stability in Jordan, because if the kingdom will fall, what will happen instead? What we will have instead? We will have another failed state like Syria, that the Iranians can come and do what they want, or ISIS, or I don't know who. So it's better this way than any other scenario that is probable.
And another front for the IDF to have to contend with again.
Yeah, today it is, with all the smugglings and everything we just discussed, Jordan is a peaceful border. It's a border of peace with everything that is going on.
Finally, for the last question, I want to, looking at Israel's security challenges, what keeps you up at night? What worries you the most? Which particular threat?
Eventually, I'm a mother. What keeps me up at night is that my two boys will be recruited within the next few months to the next few years. And I don't know what will happen if they will be in combat units, which is an option. This is what will keep me up at night and keeps me up at night today. They don't know that, so don't tell them, it's a secret. In a more professional way, I think that, again, as a resident of the Galilee, I'm worried about the scenario that Iran will succeed to mobilize all these players together and actually to create a situation that is not war and not peace, that we will have incidents of rockets launched every few weeks and sirens on. My children didn't grow up under the sounds of the sirens. They grew up in a sense of security. They're not afraid to go outside in the night to walk in my town. The whole situation here is very different from the southern part of Israel. And I hope that we will not end up in an escalation that eventually we will live the same way as the southern part of Israel.
Thank you so much, Sarit. We really appreciate you coming on today. And for all the work that the Alma Center does, it's absolutely crucial. There are things that, as I said earlier, that Alma Center is doing that a lot of other think tanks in the U.S. and elsewhere are not. So it's just absolutely crucial work. We're privileged to have you with us. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for your support of Camera. We can't do it without you. And as Sarit noted, we face a lot of security challenges. And there's a lot of work to be done, and we thank you for your support. Thank you.